You come, I forge, we talk. You, good friend, I, very happy.
Don't get yourself killed. Neither of us want to see you go hollow.
Ah, hello. You don't look hollow, far from it.
You have a heart of gold. Don't let them take it from you.
Keep your marbles intact, love. At least until I lose mine.
Goodbye then. Be safe, friend. Don't you dare go hollow.
One current internet phenomena that seems to take the brain rot-inducing platform of TikTok by storm is the prevalence of videos known as Hopecore, featuring heartwarming or inspiring videos intended to restore some faith in humanity. Honestly, after being hopelessly addicted to that app for years, only recently having managed to separate it from my daily routine, easily freeing several hours a day from mindlessly doom scrolling, these Hopecore videos were easily one of, if not the best form of content on TikTok. But one game that I would see repeatedly during these compilations surprised me. Dark Souls. A game that I would, at least at first glance, not consider as being even remotely hopeful. These dark fantasy games and accompanying atmospheres are more comfortable with the likes of Berserk and other equally dark media. But these videos seem to defy the outward expectations, featuring hopeful videos with messages of not giving up. One particular phrase being used commonly: "Don't you dare go hollow." Now, I'm someone who has played some FromSoft games, namely Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, and Elden Ring. Games that I would not typically consider hopeful at all, but I was curious to find out if these videos had any weight, and boy, did they. To explain what I am going to be covering in this video, I seek to explain how Dark Souls, despite its dark tone, contains profound messages of hope. I also want to discover how exactly these messages are conveyed to the people that are playing, and conclude on the overall effect on the narrative and the players that these seemingly contradictory themes carry. But first, time for the obligatory shill. I know how annoying these sections can be, but it's been proven that sections like this are the easiest way to boost engagement. So if you do enjoy the video at any point, please consider liking and subscribing. You don't have to, but the engagement that it would provide would help a small channel like mine immensely. If not, it's okay. But without further ado, let's begin. You wake up in a decrepit prison. Your surroundings are mossy and decayed, bearing similarities to yourself. You look down to discover that you are lifeless, as decayed as the room around you, yet you still draw breath, some grander goal calling towards you. So you set forth, discovering that you are in some kind of an abandoned asylum, gathering the sparse materials around you, a rusted over weapon. As you explore this strange land, you come across a hulking monstrosity wielding some form of a weapon. Scared and fearing for your life, you run into a nearby side room, narrowly avoiding the fate of the many corpses that ordain these long-forgotten halls. But you vow to return, to slay the monstrosity ruling with an iron fist. You continue to explore, coming across an actual weapon, and with that you feel equipped to finally attempt to challenge the beast. You find a different passage into the thing's seeming throne room, positioning you above it. You wait, considering whether this is worth it or not. You decide it is. You take the plunge, landing on top of the overgrown monstrosity, slicing large chunks of its flesh from its body. You land in front of it, and the battle starts in earnest. You narrowly dodge its mighty strikes, continuing to chip into its hide. This process repeats, seemingly for too long. You start to think that this battle might be impossible, but then your next strike hits true. As the beast roars back, it collapses to the dirty tiles of the asylum, dead, and disappears into a pile of ash. You, a lonely undead, have managed the seemingly impossible. You stand triumphant in a world that considers you nothing. Whilst this may have been somewhat of a dramatic reenactment of the first section of Dark Souls 1, I think that the introductory part is both one of the most perfect starting areas in all of gaming, but also highlights the type of hope that Dark Souls seems to be trying to convey, that in the world that Miyazaki lovingly crafted, the impossible can be turned possible, just through the ceaseless endeavors of the lesser. This is demonstrated for the first area, obviously, as you start as an undead with nothing but a chipped sword and rusted armor to your name, and having to flee from your first encounter with the Asylum Demon. But as you get more prepared, finding Estus, finding an actual weapon, you come back prepared and ready, and ultimately overcome the foe. This both sets up the gameplay of Dark Souls, that somehow you have to be prepared to prepare, but also highlights the hope found within the narrative. It can also be seen through the greater narrative of Dark Souls 1, as you, the chosen undead, are fated to die. A seeming oxymoron, but the overall story of the first Dark Souls is a journey of your own death. This is necessary, at least is told to you as being necessary, to extend the Age of Fire, replacing the current Lord of Cinder Gwyn. For those who don't know, Dark Souls lore is pretty complicated, but it can be summed up like this. The Age of Fire was brought about by the undead to replace the previous Age of Ancients, a time of unchanging land, immortal dragons, and a world where the concept of light and temperature does not exist. It is a time of stagnation and nothingness, but is replaced by the advent of the fire, filling the world with light and temperature. But by the time of Dark Souls 1, the Age of Fire is long past its prime, and instead is clinging on to the last remnants of itself. What was once a raging inferno is now barely a collection of embers kept alight by the Lord of Cinder's Gwyn. That's a basic plot overview as, essentially, you, the chosen undead, journey across the dark fantasy lands of Dark Souls with areas like Anor Londo, Gwyn's Kingdom, and the awful depths of Blighttown. Why does Miyazaki like swamps so much? In order to kill Gwyn and reignite the flame with our own body. So that is what you do. Your goal that you forge endlessly on towards, killing many powerful figures on your way to Gwyn's castle, getting progressively stronger as you get closer and closer to this end goal. Your armor improves, your weapons improve, you improve, all to accomplish this singular goal, the singular objective that drives both the chosen undead and you, the player. Finally, you get to Gwyn. Waiting just outside his room, you contemplate everything you have been through. You have braved the depths of the abyss to slay Manus, brought down the corrupted forms of figures such as Quelaag, even having gone back in time to slay the warrior of legend, Artorias, however corrupted by the abyss that he was, all in service of this singular goal that had propelled you to fulfill your destiny. Kill Gwyn and extend this age that should have ended long ago. You get ready to face this climactic battle as you step through the fog gate. You are met with disappointment. Gwyn is a frail imitation of what he once was, the battle being more of a mercy killing than anything. The figure that you spent the entire length of your journey hearing about how legendary he was, about how he vanquished the dragons, about how he single-handedly was holding back the advent of the darkness, just to be met with essentially a frail old man. Defeating Gwyn seems more like putting down someone who should have died long ago. The melancholic pling pling plong of the soundtrack further compounding this movement. There is no glory in this, no legendary battle. Compared to the horrors and monsters that you have overcome so far, this battle is nothing, ending as seemingly fast as it started. You hit the final strike on Gwyn as the Lord of Cinder collapses and disappears by your hand. Now you are left with a choice. What to do with the flame? Do you throw yourself onto it, taking your seeming rightful place as the next Lord of Cinder, further prolonging an age that should have ended a long time ago, becoming a never-ending series of increasingly less potent sacrifices to a flame that seems nothing more than to die out into nothingness? You will bring about an age of flourishing repair, and will temporarily end the curse of the undead, but will it be worth it? Triggered by leaving Gwyn's arena without lighting the final bonfire. In this ending, you abandon the idea of the flame, becoming the Dark Lord and ushering in the Age of Dark, an age that is supposedly meant to be an age for men. But the corrupting tendrils of the abyss would grow ever closer, and there is no certainty that this age would be any better than the current age. I suppose this dilemma is what Gwyn struggled with. Stay with the relative comfort and safety of what you know, even if it should end, or brave the unknown, allowing the randomness of the universe to decide the fate of the world. The choice is obviously left to you, the player, and honestly both are equally unappealing. Continuing the Age of Fire is obviously unappealing, as it's only a temporary bandage. Soon, at least sooner than last time, someone else will have to link the flame, sacrificing themselves the same way as the chosen undead is expected to. But the other choice is honestly no better. as whilst it may seem like an attempt to solve the problems evident in the Age of Fire, the methods used to chase these ideals are less than ideal, relying on powers we do not understand to bring it about. But to return to the idea of hope that this video is actually about, there are two primary angles that I believe Dark Souls 1 expresses its idea with. First, within the ending in which you link the flame, as whilst it is only a temporary solution, it is more hopeful than the Age of Dark, hopeful that someone in the future will find a better solution to the problem of linking the flame, hopeful that by replicating the cycle of relinking the flame, eventually someone will come about and solve all the problems with the world. The second idea of hope is present in the protagonist, the chosen undead, and his journey overall, that is just brimming with ideas of perseverance and overcoming the impossible. To cover this, we must first address what becoming hollow entails. To make it short, becoming hollow is when someone afflicted by the undead curse loses sight of any goal, and instead becomes content with nothingness, losing themselves and becoming mindless. While similar to the bed-rotting crisis of nowadays, this attests to hope. Our player character always has a clear and precise goal, to link the flame, and as long as they never give up hope, they can persevere and accomplish these goals. The entire identity of Dark Souls hinges on the fact that you, the player, are always a cog in a far, far larger machine, filled with dangers wherever you turn. But still, the chosen undead presses on, growing and learning, fighting against seemingly impossible odds, until eventually they get to decide their own destiny. Freed from the shackles of any greater forces, these decisions are yours and yours alone, and in a world often devoid of the little men being able to make any meaningful choices, it is profoundly hopeful and posits this idea that humanity is capable of grasping endless opportunities. They just need to hold on to hope that it's possible. I also want to cover the enduring legacy of the phrase, "Don't you dare go hollow." And it's a testament to both the enduring legacy of Dark Souls 1, but also the enduring cultural relevance of the game, with it featuring on various Dark Souls Hopecore videos and it being a staple of the game. You might question, why? I believe it is because it sums up both the hopeful message of the game, with giving up not being an option, but also resonates with the gameplay. You die. A lot. It's an integral part of the experience of overcoming seemingly impossible odds, not by way of overpoweredness or some deus ex machina, but through the unceasing efforts of you. You didn't go hollow, and now you get to reap the rewards. At least, it is my interpretation of the phrase. Overall, Dark Souls 1 as a game is surprisingly indeed full of hope, while it may be somewhat buried under layers of subtext, as the dour world that it sets itself in suppresses any outside signs of a hopeful atmosphere. Once you dig a little deeper, these hopeful undertones present themselves clearly, that as long as you remain true to your goal, anything is possible, no matter what kind of unspeakable horrors stand between you and your ultimate goal. Perseverance can make anything possible, as long as, in the words of Laurentius, don't you dare go hollow. To be honest, this video was initially going to be just Dark Souls 1, but I think there is one other Dark Souls game that further demonstrates this idea of hope. That, of course, being Dark Souls 3.
Nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be cinder, that ash seeketh embers.
Dark Souls 3, as a game, represents primarily a conclusion. It stands as an ending to the Dark Souls trilogy. As such, it is a culmination of all the previous themes and stories, all wrapped into one story. This can be seen through the start, very similar to the first game, as you awake as an undead once more, in a graveyard, very similar to the Asylum, starting as broken and lost and unprepared. But once more, this does not stop you, the Ashen One, as he embarks on a journey across the lands of Dark Souls for one last time, to once again attempt to link the flame. Hope is evident from the first moment of Dark Souls 3, demonstrated by the very identity of who you are, an Ashen One, an undead that attempted to kindle the flame previously, but failed and as such were reduced to ashes. But once again, you have been called forth to attempt to re-link the flame once again, demonstrating that from the beginning, Dark Souls 3's story is a story of hope, of attempting to right the wrongs of the world. Ultimately though, Dark Souls 3 is a game about acceptance above all, but we will cover that later. For a quick story recap, Obviously spoilers, but the game follows you as you journey around the world of Dark Souls, first killing 4 Lords of Cinder who refuse to relink the flame. It is your duty as the Ashen One to slay these 4 and relink the flame, once again prolonging the Age of Fire. But unlike Dark Souls 1, the world has been abused and battered over the ages since the time of the Chosen Undead, with the flame having been continually relinked. The time between relinking grew shorter and shorter, the bodies of the Lords of Cinder growing inadequate to sustain the greedy flame. The world of Dark Souls 3 encapsulates this atmosphere of a world sustained far past its expiration date perfectly, as areas old and new are merged together, seemingly unable to remain separate, and various corpses of all kinds litter essentially all areas of the game. This idea of stagnation and decay is perfectly demonstrated by an area from the first game that is present in 3, that of course being Anor Londo. Anor Londo stands as a shadow of its former self. No longer the shining beacon of imperial majesty that it was in the first game, the age of Gwyn and his family having long since passed, it now stands as a decrepit reminder of the past, even being obscured high above the areas of Iberville, tucked away as a reminder of the old. But the most stark evidence of the corruption is Aldrich, one of the Lords of Cinder and a corrupted monster who now calls the halls of Anor Londo his home. Seemingly having consumed all that still resided in the castle, he is a twisted, rotten reminder of all that is wrong with the world of Dark Souls. But returning to the story recap, you defeat all 4 Lords of Cinder: Yorm the Giant, Aldrich the Devourer of Gods, the Abyss Watcher, and finally Prince Lothric. You return to the hub, Filing Shrine, as you place all the souls of the Lords of Cinder that you collected onto the thrones that surround the shrine. The Firekeeper, the woman who serves as both guidance and how you level up during the game, asks you to travel to the First Flame using her strength. You accept and are transported to a different Filing Shrine that stands amid the wreckage of kingdoms. From here you proceed onto the First Flame and stand face to face with the Soul of Cinder. They are an amalgamation of all prior Lords of Cinder that have previously linked the flame, a massive collection of souls that stand between you and your destiny that is getting progressively stronger and stronger every single time someone prolongs this dying age. Clashing into battle to, quite literally, decide the fate of the age as a whole, the Soul of Cinder transitions through various different forms of fighting, representing the various differing undead that have relinked the flames over the many years. A spear user, a magic user, a longsword user, a pyromancer, and finally, Gwyn. Once again, the first Lord of Cinder stands in the path of those attempting to link the flame. However, at this point, you stand powerful enough to overcome any odds, slaying the Soul of Cinder as it collapses into nothingness. Now you are left, once again, with a choice. However, this time attempting to link the flame doesn't work. As you attempt to do your duty and link the flame as the previous lords also tried to do, it is not rekindled. The game concludes as the Ashen One sits beside the flame, awaiting the dawn of the next age, whatever may come. This ending, while it may seem dour and depressing, does represent what should have happened to the world long ago, seeming that the bloated corpse of the Age of Fire deciding that enough is enough and refusing to carry on anymore. It is melancholic, but at the same time, it does seem right. However, if you are unsatisfied, there is another ending that is significantly more hopeful. If you had journeyed to an alternate version of the Filing Shrine and found the eyes of a Firekeeper, and given them to our Firekeeper, as she in fact does lack eyes, you would be given the ability to summon her after defeating the Soul of Cinder. She takes the First Flame into her hands, but the First Flame still quickly fades and dies. As she states that darkness will soon arrive, she says this:
"The first flame quickly fades. Darkness will shortly settle." But one day, tiny flames will dance across the darkness. Like embers linked by Lord's Pass.
Whilst this ending may seem similar in atmosphere to the first, the dialogue that the Firekeeper shares with us makes the ending profoundly more hopeful, as whilst this marks the end of one Age of Fire, she seems to suggest that eventually the flame will return, relying on the endless potential of humanity to make it come true. This ending ties significantly into the themes of Dark Souls 1, as even though the Age of Fire has finally come to a close, there is still hope for humanity, however slim, and in a world as unforgiving as Dark Souls, that's pretty damn hopeful. There is one more Dark Souls related thing I want to cover, at least in its relation to hope. That, of course, being the Ringed City.
Mangled remnants from every age and every land. It actually sort of lends credence to the old rumours.
Whilst I could have put this section in the Dark Souls free bit, I think this one deserves its own section, as the ending to this DLC offers perhaps the single most hopeful moment in the entire trilogy. The DLC begins as you follow Slave Knight Gael, a character introduced in the previous DLC, The Painted World, into the world of the Ring City. The Painted World is somewhat significant in terms of the story of the Ring City, so here's all you need to know about it. This first DLC sends you into the realm of the Painted World. As you explore, you find someone known as the Painter, a character of extreme importance who is the master of Slave Knight Gael, but has been imprisoned by a character known as Sister Frida to prevent her from using her powers of painting to create a new world. You, however, attempt to free her and fight Sister Frida and Father Ariandel consequently, killing them and allowing the Painted World to burn. Whilst you may not know who these two characters are, it doesn't really matter in terms of what I want to talk about, but they were the ones imprisoning the Painter. After the Painted World burns, the Painter is now free to create a new world, but she needs one thing first, the Dark Soul, roll credits, which she sends Slave Knight Gael to find, which is where we follow him to the Ring City. I'll explain what a Dark Soul is later, so just bear with me a little bit. As you follow Gael, you land in the Drag Heap, a twisted land of broken kingdoms and civilizations positioned at the literal end of time. Exploring the heap, you find and defeat the Twin Demons, which allow the Ashen One to enter the Ring City, the first city of men that is inhabited by the Pygmy Lords. This is important, and I will elaborate on it in a little bit. As you explore this winding city, you come across the Church of Filianor. It is being defended by Half-Light, Spear of the Church, who you, the Ashen One, end up defeating, granting you access to the church and, subsequently, Filianor, who sleeps clutching onto a broken egg-like ceramic, which obviously we touch, causing it to explode, and Filianor awaking. A blinding light covers the screen, and you awake to the Ring City far, far in the future, now a lifeless desert, with Filianor nothing but a fucking desecrated husk. As you venture outside, you see a pygmy running from something. Getting closer, you find Slave Knight Gael once more, gorging himself on the remains of pygmies in an attempt to claim the Dark Soul. But in pursuit of this goal, he had driven himself mad, his brain surrounded by miasma which has warped his mind. But he did in fact manage to acquire this Dark Soul. But ultimately, it is up to the Ashen One to put down Gael and claim the Dark Soul. And that is what happens. In one of, if not the best boss battles in all of FromSoft history, you duel Gael, his health bar almost as long as this video. The battle getting more and more desperate as it carries on, Gael getting more and more corrupted, forcing the player to get better and better at dodging his curse-infused attacks. Eventually, Gael falls to the relentless assault of the player, collapsing and granting the Ashen One the blood of the Dark Soul. Now, before we conclude, I just want to clarify some of the more confusing parts. First of all, what exactly is a Dark Soul? Well, it's a bit complicated, but it's essentially one of the Lord's Souls, powerful souls that were claimed by the original 4 Lords of Cinder, more specifically the soul of the Furtive Pygmy, a figure that is surrounded by quite a lot of mystery. But for us, all we need to know is that the Pygmy used his Lord's Soul to create humanity, which he gave to his descendants, creating humans. It is these humans who went on to inhabit the Ring City, and as such the Pygmy Lords who ruled the city had the Dark Souls running through their veins. But now you might ask, what was up with Filianor? Well, she was the youngest daughter of Gwyn, obviously the first Lord of Cinder, who was given to the humans along with the Ring City as thanks for fighting against the gods. Filianor had a spell put on her by the humans, represented by the egg-like thing she clutched, that kept the city safe from the passing of time, which is why the lifeless desert descends on the city once touched. The spell is broken, and the relentless assault of time is now free to attack the Ring City. Once the spell was broken, Gael attempts to slay the Pygmy Lords to claim their blood. However, due to the intense and severe passage of time, their blood was no longer being pumped. Instead, he had to drink the blood from their wounds, absorbing the dark soul into himself, which was too much for his mind to bear, driving him mad. Hopefully you now understand somewhat of what I mean, but if not, I'm sorry because I probably butchered the lore. If you do notice any inaccuracies, make sure to let me know in the comments. But back to the video. Once you retrieve the dark soul and return to the painter, she has this to say.
My thanks, Ashen One. With this will I paint a world. Please tell me thy name. I would name this painting after thee. My thanks. I will paint a world of that name. 'Twill be a cold, dark, and very gentle place. And one day, it will make someone a goodly home.
This is the single most hopeful moment in all of Dark Souls, at least in my opinion. It offers an escape from the unceasing cycles that have plagued the world for countless ages. The painter's world represents a permanent change for the better. A world that never rots would be one, presumably, that is not a victim to the ceaseless need for more and more sacrifices that afflicts the world we find ourselves in, presumably free also from the influence of deities unknowable and realms of madness that corrupt the world, like in the case of the Abyss Watchers. It represents pure, unadulterated hope, and as the overall conclusion of the Dark Souls trilogy, as quite literally the last ever piece of dialogue to be spoken in a Souls game chronologically, it ends the series on a definitive, hopeful note. It validates the journey of the Dark Souls protagonist through endless strife and battles and struggle, as this, a perfect world unafflicted by the horrors of the universe, can now be achieved. And it's all due to the player's actions, due to the ceaseless endeavors of humanity. And I believe personally that it was a perfect way to end the series, a departure from the normal darkness and gloom that is pervasive throughout the rest of this trilogy, highlighting the sheer potential that humanity can hold. You just need to grab onto a clear goal. So, to conclude, Dark Souls as a series is amazing. Whilst the gameplay may not be for everyone, the world in which it is set is undeniably phenomenal, and honestly, the mind of Miyazaki should be examined in a lab. It's a world that simultaneously manages to be both hopeless and full of hope, and honestly is a masterclass of both world building and narrative storytelling. But to return to my original aims, to discover how exactly these messages of hope are conveyed to the player, it's essentially through significant layers of subtext and wordless storytelling. The game world is so masterfully made that it doesn't have to tell you this is the potential of humanity. It is instead clearly articulated from the world and how the game is conveyed. But due to the ambiguousness of this type of storytelling, maybe you have a completely different perspective of what the game is trying to tell us. If so, that's okay. It's one of my favorite things of media like this, that the different perspectives people hold can change how they view and perceive stories. If you do have an alternate view, do let me know. I love seeing discourse on media like this. But to conclude, these themes have a profound effect on the players, at least in my own experience, and seemingly from the view of others as well. I mean, just look at the number of videos entitled something like Dark Souls Saved My Life. The sheer impact Dark Souls has had culturally can be observed. The effect that these messages of hope and endurance can have on the player base is solely positive, and in my opinion should be replicated more often in games. In a world where doomerism seems to be propagated on every social media, I know because I used to be one, some hope is exactly what the world needs, at least in my humble opinion. But just remember, if you take one thing away from this video, be safe, friend. Don't you dare go hollow. And that was that. I do hope you enjoyed this almost retrospective like on themes of Dark Souls. I do really enjoy making these types of videos, so I hope you at least somewhat enjoy them as well. I know I didn't talk about Dark Souls 2, but if I do ever talk about it, I want that to be its own video, as I have a lot of thoughts on it. But once again, if you enjoyed, do make sure to like and subscribe. You can also follow my Twitter down below if you want. I want to try and be more active on it, but if not, then I still hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.